All right, let's get started. Thank you all for joining today. Welcome to Choosing Vulnerability to Protect Yourself, Freedom in Security. My name is Allie Mellen. I'm an industry analyst at Forrester Research. I cover SIM, SOAR, EDR, XDR, and security analytics. In a past life, I was a mobile developer and a security practitioner, and I ran my own engineering consultancy for a while. I want to start off by being a little vulnerable with you guys, because that's what this talk is all about. And if you want, you can be vulnerable too. And I want to ask you, what is your guilty pleasure show? I'll start with mine, but if you want to put yours in the chat, feel free. And if you don't, that's okay too. Mine, unfortunately, is Keeping Up with the Kardashians. I don't know why. There's just sometimes where you want to just disconnect and watch people do things that make no sense to you. So that's my guilty pleasure. And the reason that I'm asking that is because vulnerability is really important, and it's also very scary. It takes a lot of courage. This is a quote from Brené Brown on vulnerability. Her saying, "It sounds like truth and feels like courage. Truth and courage aren't always comfortable, but they're never weakness." Now, Brené Brown it would be very wrong of me not to mention her in a talk about vulnerability. If you don't know her, you should definitely look her up. She kind of defined vulnerability from the perspective of emotional intelligence, where it's all about uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure, really allowing ourselves to be seen for who we are. And that's what we're talking about today, is not just wanting to do that, but operationalizing it, making it actually happen for ourselves. So on that note, this session is meant to transform choices that we make from being experience and emotion-based to values-based, really keying into the things that we do and why we do them in order to engage our vulnerability and bring our complete self to the activities that we do. That's what we're going to talk about. We're going to start by going over very quickly, because I don't like to stay on this, but what everyone is telling you to be. We're going to talk about what happens when you actually try to be that, and then really get into how to break free and how to be your own person before talking about the steps that you can do to bring your true self to every interaction that you have. Now, as people in general, but especially as women, especially in a field like security, we get a lot of comments, a lot of unsolicited advice, like all of this on the screen in front of you. These are all things that I have been told at one point or another in my career. I would love to hear if these resonate with you. Please feel free to comment in the chat if these resonate with you, or if you've heard something different that has struck you and really impacted how you communicate and how you interact. I bring these up briefly because they're important to talk about, they're important to mention, but they are not who we are. And it really, talking about these types of comments lays the foundation for why it's so challenging for us to open up and be vulnerable, and why it's so important to do. So I want to dig into what happens when we actually follow these comments, which I have done numerous times. When we listen to these types of comments, we go through a cycle. It starts with actively engaging in a meeting and sharing our own personal opinions based on our experiences, based on our emotions. We're often told to listen intently, to not interrupt after that happens by either our superiors or other colleagues. And that leads to us quietly listening and not talking in meetings. And ultimately, you end up being perceived as very shy, not very knowledgeable. This is at least one example of a cycle that I have lived through a number of times and made the mistake of living through a number of times. And I call it the cycle of insanity, because ultimately, when you go through this cycle, you just end up in the same place. You just end up responding to the same criticism and then being something that you're not. It feels unsustainable. it feels yucky, and it's really not true to the person that you are. At least in my experience, it hasn't been. And it sucks. It genuinely sucks. And it sucks for a number of reasons. From my perspective, when I try to be something that I'm not, when I try to do things that are validated externally, I'm anxious all the time. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. I'm not sure what the right choice is. I struggle to connect on a deeper level, which is something that is really important to me. And when I have that connection, I really value it. So it is frustrating when I can't make that connection. And ultimately, it doesn't feel like I'm living my life. It feels like I'm living a life that's meant to meet other people's expectations. But it can feel really hard to break free of. And the reason that we do it is because we have a path that from a very young age, we're taught to follow. As women, especially, many of us were taught that we have to accept and internalize the advice that's given to us when it comes from authority figures, but also when it comes from our siblings or other people in our life. We need to take that information and fit a mold that other people have asked us to fit into. And this is what that looks like. You can see this is built on a foundation of validation by the things that others think are the right things to do. So you start by making a personal choice that's based on your experiences or your emotion. You're given that unsolicited external perspective, and then you internalize that information and change your behavior. And this is the problem, is that that's a really easy cycle to get into, and it's a really hard cycle to break free of. So what I want to talk about today is introducing how we can evaluate whether that advice is actually beneficial for us and who we are and who we truly want to be. So you can see the nexus of our decision-making revolves around that unsolicited external perspective and the validation that we're getting from others. Now, this is a quote from Oprah, another person who is very good about being vulnerable and who has a number of really, really compelling talks about the importance of living up to who you want to be. We all want to fulfill the highest, truest expression of ourselves as human beings. And this is the point of what we're talking about. This is the point of vulnerability, is to be able to live up to that person that you really want to be. So now to the solution. How do we actually break free of the cycle of insanity? We add in a step, and we start the process based on our personal values. And if you don't know what your personal values are, that's great, because we're going to talk about that later. But if you do, even better. So decision making, when you're doing it in such a way that you don't get caught up in other people's external validation, is based around your personal values and your value system. You are able to get that unsolicited and external perspective and then evaluate whether that choice actually holds true to your values or not. And then you make the decision as the ruler of your kingdom, the ruler of your own life, to either disregard or implement that advice. But the key here is that even though you are open and willing to change behavior, it's based on what you value as opposed to what others value. So we change the nexus of the conversation to your own personal values and your own personal evaluation. This is a quote that's really important to me because I definitely fall into the pattern of adapting to what others expect of me in order to make them happy. But ultimately, you're never going to make everyone happy. Someone's always going to disagree with you. But the most important thing that you can do is to not let the person that disagrees with you be yourself. Make decisions that you agree with and that you're proud of. So is the talk over? Did we finish this? No. You might be thinking that, but no, that was all the easy part. We're actually just about to get to the hard part. And that's about figuring out your values, figuring out your meaning, the meaning of your life, and really what's important to you, what activities are important to you, so that you can make decisions that actually are working for you. So we're going to break this down, and we're going to do an exercise or 2 or 3 to understand what our values actually are. And this is meant to be interactive. So please throw comments into the chat as much as you want. Or if you don't feel comfortable with that, if you're not ready to open up in that way, that's cool too. You can write it down, but this is meant to be an interactive, immersive experience. So here we go. We're going to answer questions like, what are values? What's the meaning of your personal existence, your personal life? What are your core personal values? And what are your life pillars? And this may sound a little bit heavy, but it's actually the type of thing that will lead you down a path of being able to be more vulnerable and more in the moment every day. I'm going to start by separating morals and values. On one side of the coin, you have morals, which are the set of principles and statements that society has created for us. There's nothing wrong with them, but they tend to be influenced by external factors like religion, like the environment, like society. Some examples are always respect your elders. People should not cheat. Always tell the truth. Respect religion. These are things that are widely accepted by our culture. They can be influenced by our religion, but they're very different than values, because values are those set of principles that an individual actually inherits starting at a very young age. So these are more intuition-based. They're things, common threads that you've noticed throughout your life that you're drawn to. Some examples are things like trust, transparency, authenticity. They tend to remain with an individual for a very long time, sometimes most of their life. So I want to throw some core values examples at you, and feel free to comment in the chat with any of them that resonate with you, or write them down. We're going to come back to this list in a minute, but I want to throw it out there to kind of give you an idea of what some of the core values are. It's important to just like take note of all the ones that really resonate with you so that we can link them back to your core 5 values later. So don't be limited by any particular number. Just consider which ones you relate to. I relate a lot to adventure, creativity, curiosity. There are a lot of really cool ones in here. There are also some that I don't really relate to. I am not really a poised person. Unfortunately, I'd like to work on it, but it's not my strong suit. So that isn't something that I would pick as a core value. And now we're going to take a step back from those values. We're going to come back to that list, but I want to kind of use that to inform what is the meaning of your own life. This is a heavy, heavy topic, but it's actually really important. If some of you know what the meaning of your life is, feel free to comment. I'd love to hear it. This is something that I personally struggled with for a while, which we'll talk about in the next slide. But if you're having trouble figuring it out, think about your job, your hobbies, your religion, what your favorite things to do are, what your hopes are for the future, not just for your future, but the future of additional generations. And consider which one of these might resonate. These are just some options. It's not comprehensive, but it is a good basis to start seeing like, oh, that one makes sense to me. I think that that really resonates with me. I want to continue the human race, or I live in service of others. When I was trying to figure this out, I was really stuck. I grew up in a family that talked a lot about religion. My mom was Catholic, my dad was atheist. And so I had this mix of a mother who wanted me to know that I'd go to heaven with her, and a father who didn't believe there was any meaning to life, which was actually not that great. It was kind of depressing. But it made me into the atheist that I am today. And I kind of struggled with what the meaning of life was if there was no meaning of life, if there was no next step, if there was no soul. So in order to address that, I read a lot of things online, just racking my brain trying to figure out what the meaning of my personal life was, why I was here, if 500 years from now, no one was going to remember me. And ultimately, of all things, I found a thread on Reddit that talked about the meaning of life. And there was one halfway down the page that said, the meaning of life is to live the human experience. You are given this body, you are given this mind, and you have the opportunity to live all of the things that you want to live. And that resonated with me. That was the one that stuck for me. It's not the one that sticks for everyone. But for me, that was the moment where I was like, oh my God, this is what I was meant to do. This aligns to my values. This helps me understand my values better. And it let me stick to and align to my values a lot better. So think about the meaning of life. It's not something that you need to like brainstorm and come up with right now, but it is something that can really help you understand a little better what you want to do and what drives you. So coming back to these core values and kind of using that meaning of your life to inform these choices, consider which one of these align to either your meaning of life or just what resonates with you again. As I mentioned, like mine is definitely living the human experience. So part of that is humor, part of that is honesty, part of that is trustworthiness, because connections are really important to me. Adventure, of course, but there are a lot of these that they have to be specific to you, because this is all about finding yourself and learning from yourself. So just take a few minutes, think about which ones apply to you. Feel free to put them in the chat. And then we're going to start actually identifying and bucketing them. So also keep in mind, this is just a starter list. There are many more core values out there that are options. And I definitely encourage you to look this stuff up and read more about it, because that's really where you get the real meat of this. So here's my example of the ones that I wrote down: authenticity, adventure, balance, boldness. Balance is so important to me. I love to meditate. Boldness, also really important to me. Forrester's motto as a company is bold at work. So that fits really well. Respect and responsibility. But the thing that I want you to think about as you are deciding your values is, are you living up to them every day? What does living up to these values look like to you? With the ones that you either have written down or you think that really fit you, do you live and breathe that every moment of your life? And it's okay if you don't. There is no wrong answer here. This is in order to find out what the right answer is. So when I actually first started down this path of values, I really thought that things like respect were high on my list. And they were, but I wasn't living up to that. And being able to map these out allowed me to understand which ones I thought were important and which ones were truly important to me. And then we're going to break this down into buckets. So we've gone kind of all over the place, getting as many of these as possible. And now we want to group them into smaller buckets so we can have at most 5 core values. The reason we want 5 is because anything more than that tends to get a little unmanageable in your day-to-day life. A lot of times I will sit here doing my work or going out with friends or going out with family, and I will be having conversations and thinking how that relates back to one of my core values and whether or not I'm living up to those core values. So if you have more than 5, it tends to get a bit messy. So in my case, this breaks down into learning, which is a great fit because I really do tend to be very curious. I like to learn new things. I like to try new foods. I love adventure and travel. Respect, which makes me feel good. And when I don't feel like I have respect or show respect for others, I feel bad. And that's one of the ways that I know that it's important to me. Along with boldness, I like being a bold person. I've been, I'd argue, miscategorized for most of my life as someone who's shy because I haven't been willing to be vulnerable. But by embracing these values, it's transformed the way that I think about myself and that a lot of people think about me. The next one is love, friendship, connection, trust, and connection, which ties back to love. There's a lot of overlap there, but I think that you can have connection with the broader community and all of that. And fun and humor are definitely a part of connection. So try breaking these down into 5 separate sections. And keep in mind, I'm going to post these slides. So if you can't keep up or you're struggling with that, don't even worry about it, because I'll put these slides, I'll make these slides available so that you can actually review them and dig into your values a little more. An hour, admittedly, when I did this exercise, it took me like weeks because it's also very introspective. It's a lot of work. So what do you do once you find your 5 values, the 5 things that are really important to you or less? The first thing is to consider how this aligns to the things that you do on a day-to-day basis, the things that you bring your life meaning, and then map these values to your life activities so that you can understand a little better whether or not you're actually doing things that you think are important. So, what are your life pillars? Life pillars are how you are going to maintain balance and focus in what is clearly a very unregulated and confusing world, especially in the past year. These are the vehicle for how you are actually able to execute on your values. What's really going to be interesting about this is that your life pillars are really the combination of all of these activities that you do that you can kind of bucketize again into something that's important and you can live your values through. So some examples of life pillars are things like wealth, happiness, health, love, family. When we're thinking about how many life values we want to have, this is actually one of the reasons why they're called pillars. And this is important. I know that I personally have struggled with this, where you have one thing in your life that is the most important thing to you, and that takes up all of your time. For me, for a long time, it was my career. It's also in the past been my relationships. I don't know, feel free to comment with anything that has really like taken over your life and you've been unable to really dedicate time to anything else, if not just like little slivers of time. But the problem is when you have this one pillar, if that pillar goes away, your life is a mess. It's a total mess. And I've had this happen more than once where I thought I was doing a bad job at work. And all of a sudden it felt like my whole life was out of whack. I got that feeling in my stomach, that knot where you're like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And really my life was based around one construct. And I think this happens to a lot of people because they find something they love, they want to dedicate time to. But ultimately, you need balance in order to have a more structured life, have a more driven life down more than just one path. So I recommend picking at least 3. I think I ended up picking 4 because I'm a little greedy, but there are 3 to 4 main things that are really a core focus in your life and that are important to you, that you can map a lot of the activities that you do on a regular basis to, and that you can apply your values to and your life mission. And you'll notice if one pillar goes away, you can still make it. That pillar's not gone forever. It'll most likely come back in some form. Maybe it'll be different, but you have these 2 other things in your life that are important to you, that you dedicate time to, that you dedicate equal time to that one that you lost. And that's how you can start to really maintain balance and like Jen said in the chat, avoid that depression and insecurity, because that is very real. So give a thought to all of the activities that you do on a regular basis, just things that you really enjoy, that you get a lot of value out of. For me, that's definitely travel. Unfortunately, not right now, but in general. I love to read. I love listening to political podcasts. I'm big into the history of war. Physical health is really important to me. I love coffee and trying new coffees. So just list all of the things in your life that you do on a regular basis. This could be hanging out with friends. It could be hanging out with family. It could be your career or it could not be your career. These are the options that you get here, but they're really like the hobbies and the things that you spend time doing that you like to do. And then once you have all of those written down, we're going to bucketize them again, because for some reason I love buckets. But the point is that when you are able to translate these activities into pillars, related pillars, then you're able to understand a little better where you're dedicating your time to and how much of your time is being taken up by certain things. For example, education, big pillar of mine. I love to learn, whether it's politics or history of war or about birds. I'm a big birder. My career is a pillar of mine, but it is not the only pillar now, which is the important difference. And there's more to it than just work. There's also leadership skills and executive presence. Health is pivotal to me because I don't feel good when I haven't exercised or when I haven't eaten healthy. And then relationships as well. And the interesting thing about this, and I hope that you'll find when you map it out and really think vulnerably about how to map it out, is that there are things here that I was expecting to be my core life pillars that are not. A great example is family. I love my family, but that is not something that I can have a whole pillar of my life around. Relationships generally, yes. I have a lot of really great relationships that I value. But when I make it all about family, it just doesn't work for me. So once you're able to bucketize these life activities that you do, you can map them to your values. And this isn't important just because I like mapping all the concepts together that I'm talking about today, but it actually has an important meaning, which is that when you map your daily activities to your values, you can identify places that you're missing out and not living up to your values. You can identify things that you do on a regular basis that don't map to any of your values, and maybe they're not as important as you thought they were. And you can be able to create goals that allow you to be more vulnerable in these activities by understanding where certain things come into play. So learning is really important in my career. And I know that if I have spent too long talking about a subject that I'm really knowledgeable about, then I'm not living up to my values because I'm not learning anymore. If I am being mistrustful in my relationships, if I'm not being honest with someone, that's not living up to my values. And these are the things that are the most important things in the world to me. So why am I not living up to those values? And then again, I want to just showcase my mistake with this, which is that I piled on top of all of my values this massive career bucket. And I kept health particularly skinny, which was not great. And education and relationships suffered as well. Career was really the behemoth, and I wasn't learning. I wasn't taking care of my relationships. And I was doing all of this because I thought that that was what was supposed to bring my life meaning. But once I was able to understand what actually brings life meaning, what actually brings my own personal existence meaning, then I was able to create a more stable foundation for myself. So instead of just kind of losing the whole structure, I'm able to evenly support myself through each of these things, even when one's missing. So why did we do all this? That's the question. This is a framework that's meant to help you apply values to your daily life. By understanding your life meaning, by understanding what your core values are, and by understanding what activities you're actually doing to involve those core values. It's not only helping you identify where you can actually apply your values, but also giving you insight into what isn't quite adding up. What are you doing that doesn't live up to your values? How can you address that? And if it doesn't fit, why is it there? And that's one of the hard questions that you have to ask yourself to really hold yourself accountable to what you want to be versus what you're actively being. And this is the path to vulnerability. Because once you are able to hold yourself accountable for your choices, because you know that they're based around who you are fundamentally because of your values, then you can confidently do the things that you want to do and not worry about that external validation. The second thing that's really important here is to really work to be mindful before you act. And this comes into play because it's hard to apply your values at the spur of a moment. It's very easy for people to take action because it's a in-the-moment thing without actually evaluating if that meets their values. This was one of the big struggles that I had when trying to actually operationalize and implement this framework. But what's important and what really resonated with me as part of this conversation is that one of the reasons that accountability is so important is because it's very easy to say, I'm a good person or I'm honest without actually living that reality. We're able to make stories in our mind for what we want to believe, what our experience is based off of. Like, I really did hold honesty as a core value of mine. But when I looked at my actual actions through this framework, I was able to see that I wasn't living up to that everywhere that I should be. And that wasn't a reason for shame. It wasn't a reason to be upset at myself. It was just something that I either had to address or remove it as one of my values because I wasn't living up to it. So let's talk about how we can actually implement this in a regular conversation. I am a huge fan of mindfulness. As I mentioned earlier, I love to meditate. It really helps me stay even and calm throughout the day. I also love yoga. And one of the things that's really important in mindful meditation is to give yourself room to think and to act before you actually jump to a conclusion and do something else. So the way that I like to think about this is there's a moment in time where you have an emotion. And then for many, and for me for a long time, you follow it up immediately with an action. But here's the challenge. There is room between emotion and action. And when you are able to pull emotion away from action, there is a breath of time where you have the opportunity to pause and to introspect and to consider what your values are and whether or not the action you're about to take will be a reflection of them. And that's the moment that really decides whether or not we're living up to our values. That's the moment that really decides whether we are making the choice to be vulnerable. Emotions, this is like the most important thing that I could ever say, because at least from my point of view, when I first heard it, I was like, oh my God, this changes my whole world. Emotions are not actions. They're different. You don't have to act on your emotions. You can be okay feeling them. You don't have to let them go. You can feel angry. You can say that you feel angry, but you don't have to act on it. And that's what that pause is all about. So a lot of times, for example, when we hear things, we will tell ourselves stories in order to, because that's what fits with our experience. So I'll give you an example. When a guy is mansplaining, a lot of times I'll hear that and I'll say, oh God, he's mansplaining because he thinks I'm incompetent. That's a story that I'm telling myself. I don't have factual basis in reality. That's not what he's telling me. All he's telling me is that he wants to explain something to me that I already know. And that pause is meant to help us break through the stories that we tell ourselves. In a similar case, if someone's yelling at you, a lot of times my reaction to that is, I did something wrong. I should feel shame for that. But if I'm able to, and if we are able to actually pause between when someone is yelling at us, after we feel that emotion and say, I don't need to feel shame about this. I need to talk to him about what's happening. I need to remove myself from the situation. These are the activities that will help us be true to who we are. So how do we break this cycle? The answer is we change the nexus. We take the nexus off of that unsolicited external perspective. We make decisions based around our personal values. And then we use our integrity to either back up those choices by saying, this is something that I believe in because it's based on my personal values. This is who I am as a person. You don't have to like it, but this is who I am. And then you can choose to either internalize their advice or disregard it. And what we need to do is we need to turn over the cycle of insanity and turn it into the cycle of vulnerability, where we're able to make these value-based choices. We're able to take in unsolicited external opinions. We can pause and then reflect on whether or not what we said meets our values or what we did meets our values. And if it does, then we can move on. And we don't need to change the way that we work, because our choices and our decisions have become about ourselves instead of about the external validation of others. So to recap, to transform the way that you make choices from an emotions and experience-based decision into a values-based choice is critical if you want to really live up to who you want to be as a person, to own your vulnerability and to bring your complete self to the activities that you do. I want to give you some book recommendations that I find really valuable. Not all of these are related to vulnerability, but some of them are. So Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. For anybody who's looking to become a better communicator, that's the book. It changed my life. And actually, I've heard it more than once at a security conference. The other thing is Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. She also has a podcast, and she's incredible. So I highly recommend you listen or read anything that she's done. And then the last one is You Are a Badass, which is a really, really great book. It's just, it's a feel-good book. So I highly recommend that as well. And yeah, that is my talk. I want to thank you guys so much for being vulnerable with me, letting me be vulnerable with you. And I am happy to take any questions. You can also find me on Twitter at HackerBella. So fire away. Feel free if you have any questions. And yeah, feel free to reach out to me anytime on Twitter too. Like, I am more than happy to have a conversation and chat more about this, share the slides, all of that. So thank you all. Awesome. Bye, everyone.